In the year 1099, the First Crusade reached its climax. After years of hardship, starvation, and bloody marches, the Crusader army stormed the walls of Jerusalem. The holy city, long contested between Christians and Muslims, fell under their control. Amid the cries of victory and the ringing of church bells, a new political experiment was born: the Crusader kingdoms. These were not mere outposts, but ambitious attempts to transplant European rule into the heart of the Middle East. From Jerusalem to Antioch, they were forged in fire, blood, and faith, becoming fragile bridges between East and West. Their existence would shape centuries of conflict, diplomacy, and legend. The Crusader kingdoms were carved from conquest. 4 states emerged: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa, and the County of Tripoli. Each was ruled by European lords, yet surrounded by a sea of Islamic powers. Their castles, monasteries, and towns became miniature replicas of Europe on Levantine soil. But unlike their homelands, survival here required constant vigilance. The kings and princes of these states lived with the knowledge that enemies pressed on every frontier. They relied on alliances, trade, and the sword to sustain themselves. While fragile in structure, they represented a bold vision: Christian rule planted deep in the heart of the Holy Land.
At the center stood the Kingdom of Jerusalem, ruled first by Godfrey of Bouillon, who refused the title of king, and later by Baldwin I, who embraced it. Jerusalem became both a crown and a burden. Its rulers guarded not only territory, but also sacred shrines, the Holy Sepulchre above all. Pilgrims from Europe flocked to the city, filling its streets with foreign tongues, merchants, and clerics. Yet the city's walls were fragile, and its defenders few. The kingdom stretched thinly from the coast of Jaffa to the Jordan River, vulnerable to attack from every side. Its survival demanded constant reinforcement from Europe and uneasy truces with Muslim neighbors.
The County of Edessa, the first Crusader state to be established, lay far to the northeast. It was distant, isolated, and exposed to hostile powers. Edessa's lords struggled to defend its open plains and vulnerable towns. In 1144, disaster struck. The Muslim leader Zengi captured the city, shocking Christendom. The fall of Edessa sparked calls for the Second Crusade, drawing kings and knights once again into the Holy Land. Edessa's brief life reminded the West of the fragility of these states and the ruthless determination of their enemies. It was the first Crusader state to be lost, but it would not be the last.
Further south lay the Principality of Antioch, perched at the crossroads of empires. Antioch was a city of immense prestige, once one of Christianity's great centers. Its Crusader princes ruled a land of mixed cultures: Greek, Armenian, Muslim, and Latin. Antioch's citadel dominated the skyline, a symbol of power and ambition. Yet, Antioch's survival depended on fragile alliances. It endured wars with Muslim neighbors and political struggles with Byzantium, which claimed overlordship. For centuries, Antioch stood as a beacon of Latin power in the East, but also as a reminder of how precarious that power truly was. Along the coast of Lebanon rose the County of Tripoli, the last of the Crusader kingdoms to be founded. Established after long sieges and naval support from Genoese allies, Tripoli became a vital link between Europe and the Holy Land. Its counts ruled a narrow coastal strip, fortified with castles overlooking the Mediterranean. Tripoli prospered through trade, drawing merchants from Italy and the East. Yet its wealth made it a target, and its borders were contested by both Muslim emirs and rival Crusader princes. Despite its elegance, Tripoli was always vulnerable, a jewel that glittered but could shatter under pressure. Along the coast of Lebanon rose the County of Tripoli, the last of the Crusader kingdoms to be founded. Established after long sieges and naval support from Genoese allies, Tripoli became a vital link between Europe and the Holy Land. Its counts ruled a narrow coastal strip, fortified with castles overlooking the Mediterranean. Tripoli prospered through trade, drawing merchants from Italy and the East. Yet its wealth made it a target, and its borders were contested by both Muslim emirs and rival Crusader princes. Despite its elegance, Tripoli was always vulnerable, a jewel that glittered but could shatter under pressure.
The castles of the Crusader kingdoms remained their most enduring legacy. Towering strongholds like Crac de Chevalier and Belvoir Castle stood as symbols of defiance. Built with massive stone walls, deep moats, and ingenious defenses, they could withstand sieges that lasted months. From these fortresses, knights launched raids into enemy territory and repelled assaults from larger armies. The castles were not only military outposts, but also centers of administration and life, where lords, soldiers, and settlers carved out a fragile existence. Today, their ruins still dominate the landscape, silent witnesses to centuries of war.
Despite the clash of faiths, the Crusader kingdoms were also places of exchange. European settlers lived among Muslims, Jews, and Eastern Christians. Markets overflowed with spices, silk, and precious goods from across the Levant and beyond. Architecture blended East and West, with churches influenced by Islamic styles and palaces decorated with Arabic art. Though born of war, the Crusader states became crossroads of cultures, where merchants and pilgrims mingled under uneasy peace. This mixture enriched Europe, bringing knowledge, medicine, and traditions that would reshape the medieval world.
But war never remained far away. The Crusader kingdoms existed in constant tension, their survival tied to fragile truces and shifting alliances. Muslim leaders, from Zengi to Nur el-Din, sought to unite their people against the invaders. The balance of power tipped when a new force arose: Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. Charismatic and brilliant, he launched campaigns that threatened the very heart of Crusader rule. His victories would soon shake the foundations of these fragile states. In 1187, the Crusader kingdoms faced their greatest trial. At the Battle of Hattin, Saladin's forces encircled the Crusader army under King Guy of Lusignan. Exhausted by heat and thirst, the Crusaders broke. The relic of the true cross was captured, and thousands of knights were slain or taken prisoner. Hattin was more than a defeat. It was a catastrophe. Within months, nearly every city of the kingdom, including Jerusalem itself, fell into Saladin's hands. Only a few coastal strongholds remained, a fragile lifeline for Crusader power in the Holy Land. The loss of Jerusalem shook Christendom. Pope Gregory VIII called for a new crusade. Kings of Europe responded: Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. The Third Crusade became legendary, a clash of titans between Richard and Saladin. Though Richard won victories at Acre and Arsuf, he could not retake Jerusalem. A truce allowed Christian pilgrims to visit the Holy City, but the dream of restoration faded. The Crusader kingdoms survived, but now as thin strips of coastal fortresses, shadows of their former glory. In the years that followed, the Crusader states became increasingly dependent on European aid. Orders like the Templars and Hospitallers built ever stronger castles to guard the coast. Cities like Acre became hubs of trade, where Italian merchants brought goods and wealth. Yet factionalism plagued the Crusaders. Rivalries between nobles, kings, and military orders weakened unity. While Muslim powers grew stronger and more united, the Crusaders quarreled, leaving themselves vulnerable. Their survival was measured not in centuries, but in decades. The Mongol invasions in the 13th century briefly offered hope. As Mongol armies crushed Muslim powers from Persia to Syria, some Crusaders dreamed of alliance. Envoys traveled east, proposing joint campaigns. Yet the dream faded as Mongols pursued their own aims and withdrew. The Crusader kingdoms were left alone once more, caught between greater powers, their fortresses increasingly isolated. By the late 1200s, the end was drawing near. Acre, the Crusader capital after Jerusalem's loss, became the final bastion of Latin Christendom in the East. The city was vibrant, filled with merchants, knights, and pilgrims. But beneath its prosperity simmered tension. Rival factions clashed, and trust eroded. When the Mamluks of Egypt rose under Sultan Baybars, they targeted the remaining Crusader strongholds with relentless campaigns. Castle by castle, city by city, the Crusader states crumbled. In 1291, the storm finally came. the Mamluks besieged Acre, determined to wipe out the Crusader presence once and for all. For weeks the city resisted with courage, its walls battered by siege engines, its defenders fighting desperately. Yet the tide could not be held. On May 18th, Acre fell. The slaughter was immense, the survivors fleeing by ship. With Acre's fall, the last Crusader kingdom in the Holy Land was gone. The fall of the Crusader kingdoms did not erase their memory. In Europe, stories of knights and holy wars filled chronicles, inspiring generations. The Templars and Hospitallers endured, their power reshaped in new lands. The legacy of Crusader architecture, trade, and cultural exchange lingered. Though forgotten as states, the Crusader kingdoms left marks on both East and West, their rise and fall etched into history. For the peoples of the Middle East, the Crusades were invasions, centuries of conflict that reshaped cities and borders. For Europe, they were pilgrimages turned wars, ventures of faith and ambition. Between the two, the Crusader kingdoms were caught, states born of conquest, doomed by geography and division. Their memory remains complex, remembered as both tragic folly and heroic struggle, depending on who tells the tale.
The ruins of their castles still stand, from the shores of Lebanon to the hills of Syria. Weathered by centuries, they remain silent witnesses. To some, they represent conquest. To others, courage. To historians, they are reminders of the fragility of power when ambition outpaces unity. The Crusader kingdoms, once proud and bold, are now echoes in stone, fading into the desert wind.
Thus ended the tale of the Crusader kingdoms, forgotten states of the medieval Middle East. They were born of faith, sustained by courage, and destroyed by division. For 2 centuries they stood as bridges and battlegrounds between civilizations. Today their story lingers in ruins, chronicles, and memory. The Crusader kingdoms remind us of the enduring clash and connection between worlds, and of the fragile nature of empire itself.